Hello, good morning. Welcome to the Google Digital Garage training session, Get Insights with Google Analytics. Today's session will run for about an hour. And just to kick off, hi, my name is Richard. I'm a trainer for Google Digital Skills Training Program, Google Digital Garage. So just a little bit about myself. I'm an analytics specialist and trainer, and I worked in Google for over 5 years. I worked with all sorts of clients and companies, from small businesses to large global brands. And I also do a little bit of startup mentoring here in Dublin as well. And I also would like to introduce you to our moderator, Michael Knowles. Michael is a Google Digital Garage coach and will be interacting with you and answering some of your questions via the instant chat to the right. You can identify the moderator by his name, as well as the little blue spanner next to their name as well. So before we continue on, just a quick fire housekeeping notes. And I just wanted to call out a few things to help you today. So if you're having any trouble viewing the webinar right now, please do try refreshing your page, and also throughout the webinar. If you'd like to join the instant chat, you need a YouTube account, which you can easily set up by clicking on the box on the right. And also, we'll be pausing throughout the session to answer the most complex questions from the chat box. So please do feel free to ask away any kind of questions you have, and we'll address those either by myself or Michael will add in any relevant links. So just to let you know, we're running this Google Digital Garage virtual training as part of a broader offering of courses. So if you'd like to check out our schedule of upcoming webinar trainings, please see information in this description below, which links you to our website. So feel free to share the experience on social media and tell your friends and family about these webinars using the hashtag Digital Garage. Lastly, if you have any feedback from today's session, please complete the feedback form linked down in the description box. Once you complete the feedback form, a link will appear for you to download a PDF of today's content. We'll also keep the webinar live for you to rewatch for 24 hours. So yeah, that's housekeeping done. Let's see what we'll cover today. So the session will be split into 3 key areas. So we'll look at Google Analytics reporting, so specifically kind of key components. And then we'll also dive into 4 essential reports in Google Analytics and how to use them. So specifically audience, acquisition, behavior, and conversion reports. And then we'll also have a look at dashboards. So how to combine all the essential information in an easily overviewable way. So that sounds good. I'd say let's kick off. Perfect. So some of you might have attended last week's workshop, Setting Up Google Analytics for Success. And in that one, we covered creating a measurement plan, collecting data, and creating goals. So the framework really that needs to be set up to measure data with Google Analytics. But today's session will be about how to get insights and how to take action from this data, because it's not just about kind of measuring and collecting, it's also what you do with that information. So a lot of businesses and startups do sometimes get overwhelmed with the amount of data they would see in Google Analytics. So hopefully today's session will clarify some of those things. So let's start with Google Analytics reporting. So one of the most important things. So 4 components make Google Analytics happen. So collection, so measurement of the data itself, configuration, so setup, and then we process that data, and then we report it. So today we'll look at the reporting. So all the interesting insights we can get from the Google Analytics front end. So one of the first reports is a real-time analytics report. So what we can do here, if you haven't done this before, we also have a Google Analytics demo account. So Michael's going to add that into the chat as well. But let me show you how you can access that. So we'll go to our Google Analytics Support Center. You'll see this button here, Access Demo Account. Let me just share this tab. You'll see this button here, Access Demo Account. Once you click on that, it will open up a Google Analytics account right here. So Any of the slides I am showing, you can follow through in this account as well. So this is accessible by everyone, and it shows information from Google Merchandise Store. So if you want to deep dive a little bit more in depth about what data you might be seeing, this is where you can do that. So back to the presentation. So one of the few things that that people like to see in Google Analytics is a real-time analytics report. Generally, analytics as a platform is meant for analyzing large data sets of users, but sometimes we use a real-time analytics report just to check essentially the setup health. Is it measuring data correctly? And sometimes when I'm working with brands and companies, we use the real-time report to also test if the user flow is basically set up correctly. So I would click from a Google Ads search ad, I would land on a page, and then we'd see in the Google Analytics report that a user has landed from the specific source. So this is a great way just to check if everything is working. And so the website data is processed in 4 data types: acquisition, audience, behavior, and we have kind of behavior exit, but also goals. Generally, I'd split them into acquisition, audience, behavior, and goals themselves. So these 4 main reports in Google Analytics, if we really simplify them, audience will tell you about who is visiting your site. Acquisition is how they get to your site, and then behavior is what are they doing on the site itself, and then conversions are what are we actually getting out of this? Are we meeting our business KPIs essentially? Are the users doing what they're supposed to do on the website, be it purchasing anything, subscribing, or spending time on the site, even reading articles or interacting with the website itself? So if you look at these reports in this kind of way, it helps you understand what you need to be looking out for. So let's deep dive into audience reporting. So audience reporting is one of the most, I'd say, interesting bits of reporting, because a lot of businesses go through the traditional kind of setup of drawing their ideal audience, their ideal customer. And very often what we then see with these reports, or actually when we look at real data, is the actual reflection of the core customer itself. Sometimes it's spot on, but very often we see differences to what your audience, to what you want your audience to be, and what we're actually seeing. At the same time as well, we use Google Analytics to almost create clusters of audiences, because not every audience and not every client is exactly the same, and they do not interact with your website or find you exactly the same way. So let's have a look how we can do that. So you can access audience reporting from the audience tab, first of all, and then these are the subsections that we can see, that we can break down this audience. So from general overview, we'll have a look at that in a second. Active users, lifetime value, cohort analysis as well. But most common reports we would be seeing are demographic report. Let's say what's the average kind of age of, let's say, most the audience groups that are converting the best. Also, what are their interests? Specific geos. So let's say which cities in a specific country do you acquire more users? Then also things like technology. So would you see a lot more users from a particular browser, or more users from a mobile device or a desktop? And a few other reports as well. So there's 5 ways essentially that we can visualize the data in the audience report, but also broader reports that we look at. So the overview report. So this would be here. So any of the reports you'll access generally will have this overview report. So it's a quick stop to see all your essential data. Then we have data comparison. So specifically, we can look at different dates and timeframes. So for some businesses, they might be interested in week-over-week performance, or if you're doing a yearly review and you want to see this user session amount changes, or are they more engaged with your website than they were a year ago? Then we also have primary dimension. So the primary dimension will be what's the primary dimension you're trying to analyze the information. So in this case, it is demographic age buckets. That would be the primary dimension. And then we have a secondary dimension. So this adds on to the primary dimension. So in this case, we have secondary dimension country. So if we combine these two, our report will tell us, firstly, demographic bucket breakdown with additional information of the visitor country itself. And then we can also sort the tables. So for some businesses, they might be more interested in sorting by sessions or conversions, for example, purchases, or any of the other interaction metrics your website might have. So knowing these 5 will get you through most of the reports in Google Analytics. So the overview report. Who are my visitors? So if we look at this report, so this is a audience overview report. We've selected a time frame here, November 1st, 2017 to November 30th, 2017. So this gives us essentially a graph, so users to the website in this time range, and then we can see a time series on how they've interacted with a website. So very clearly, we can start identifying very rough patterns. My assumption here would be this is probably a weekend here, and then we have the workday, and then there's a dip in the weekend. But looking at a time frame like this, we also see, hey, there's a spike here, right? And if I see something like this, that gives me a bit more insight what I need to zone in. So then I change my time period just to understand what's happening only in this space. And then it gives us top line information. So like users, new users, sessions, number of sessions per user. Because sometimes, let's say in this 30-day period, users might be coming back to the website more than once. Then also page views. So your website has multiple pages, right? So how many page views users would be triggering. And then pages on average per session. So we see that on average, when a user comes to the website, they would look at about 4.3 pages in their browsing session. And then average session duration, about 2 minutes, 20 seconds. Bounce rate is when a user visits the website, but they leave the website without interacting with any other website elements. So not clicking to a different page or interacting with any events. So we can also do data comparison. Data comparison, something I mentioned before here, we have, for example, February 1st to February 28th, and we want to compare to previous period, which will automatically default to January 4th to January 31st. And this will give us almost a breakdown of page views that we have in the current section, current selection, and then the difference between the previous period as well. We have also a live question, I see. I'll just answer this right now. I say, so Delphine, how accurate is the age? I see a much younger audience in GA than our converting customers. Any advice? So any kind of Google demographics reports are I say a general report, a generalization report. We're not looking at individual user when we combine them into a Google Analytics report itself. So in this case, it is accurate, but I would also look at the differences between what the visitors are and what are they essentially converting. How are they converting? I've had a situation with a business where they've told me that their core audience is 45 plus. 45 plus because they interact with them most of the times. But when we looked at the analytics and digital, in digital section, we saw that users 18 to 35 were converting digitally, and then actually they were communicating with users 45 plus. They just saw them more often. So these kind of reports and demographic breakdown allows us to understand that difference between both. So generally, yes, it is accurate. It depends on the business. It depends on the overall demographic composition, but there's a little bit more complex answer on the behaviors and observed behaviors of your clients. Perfect. So continuing on. So we touched upon primary dimension. So here's an example of what technology do they use. So here we have by default selected browser, right? So Google Analytics will then tell you, for example, that here in this example, majority of the users are using Chrome. And then we have a little bit of Safari, Firefox, Edge. What we can also do here is then have a look at a bit more detail about operating systems, for example, things like screen resolution, flash version, or any of the other reports themselves. So first of all, it's then asking yourself how important this is. Right? If you are, for example, looking at screen resolution, it will then tell us, if users are browsing on a specific, predominantly browsing on a specific mobile screen size, for example. But generally, when you're designing websites, you'll design a website that has adaptive features to any kind of screen. So in this case, then you try to figure out why would you look at all the reports themselves and what you're trying to get out of this. Because I mentioned it's an overload of data it doesn't really benefit anyone. It's just trying to start with a hypothesis, what you want to find out and what you're going to do with that data itself. There's also a cool little feature that you can ask Google Analytics what you want to find out. So as we see, there's quite a lot of different reports, and there's a lot of different sub-reports themselves. So here's an example that you might just type in the search box right at the bottom. So for example, percent of users from Ireland. So the system will then try to figure out what you're asking and see if it can create a report that will then give you that information based on some of the base information that it has access to. So do play around with this. Generally, at the moment, this is available for analytics accounts that have English as the primary language, but we're developing functionality for other languages as well. So then we have a secondary dimension. So combining two dimensions manually. So for example, here we want to see primarily users from Ireland, but we want to also then break down the device category. So then the information that is being outputted is, for example, the most users in the time period are from Ireland on desktop. Then it's Ireland on mobile, and then we have tablet itself. So then you see all the additional information like new user sessions, bounce rates, pages per session, etc. So this allows for a lot more detailed breakdown. And what you can also do is, for example, you can break it down by as well city, for example, right? Or doing city and device category, or any of the other categories you want. So let's move on to acquisition reporting. And yeah, if you have any other questions, please add them into the chat, and then we'll do a little pause to go through all of them as well. So acquisition reporting, I'd say also an extremely important report itself. So as audience was there to understand who you're who you're reaching essentially, and who are the kind of the key demographics or key segments that are engaging with your business. The acquisition report starts to matter quite a lot when you're looking at expanding the business, when things are getting a little bit more complicated than just purely looking at basic search, but when you're doing any collaborations, any paid acquisition, any articles, anything like that. So you need to understand what's actually then driving the traffic to your website, and at what efficiency it's driving the traffic to your website as well. So an acquisition report, you can find that here in the acquisition. So if we think about the simplification is how they got to the website. So, and then we have a kind of subsection breakdown. Oh, we have our overview section, which we're familiar with now. all traffic breakdown. So we'll see all the traffic acquisition reports. We can also isolate just Google Ads, for example, or looking at Search Console or social or campaigns. And campaigns here, if you're using something like UTM tags, you can set specific names for your own campaigns, and this would help you out, kind of getting reports on at that level and that granularity. So generally, under two more ways of visualizing data here. So we have charts and graphs. So here we have, for example, a pie chart, and then advanced table filter. So advanced table filters will allow you to create something a bit more detailed, essentially what you're trying to filter out. So here, for example, include country containing a specific parameter. You can also add in a AND function, or you can add in as well a dimension or a metric. So this allows for a lot more robust filtering that then minimizes the noise essentially in the data, instead of filtering everything and then trying to get through the reports. You just eliminate the specific filters you're not particularly interested or analyzing at that moment. So visualizations of acquisition reporting. So here we have our basic breakdown of traffic you might see in an analytics account. So let's go through the basics here. So we have first, in this specific example, majority of the traffic is coming from organic search. So for analytics, it indicates that a visit is from our organic, so unpaid search results. So it is determined by medium of organic. So I'll go through a little bit in the medium source report. Then we have direct. Right. So in general, it indicates when a user navigates directly to the URL, or the source of the visit is unknown as well. So, for example, if the setup isn't necessarily correct, if you're running any promotional banners or something like that the system cannot essentially read what type of traffic it is because it hasn't been set up correctly, it might just put it into direct. Then we also have referral. So referral indicates traffic where users clicked from a link from another site, excluding major search engines. So it's determined by medium of referral. So this could be, let's say, sponsored links and articles, anything like that. Then we have social. So social will be anything that's social networks, essentially. Then number 5, we have paid search right over here. So as the name indicates, a traffic from a PPC campaign run in search results. So this would be any of the search networks, for example. Then we have affiliates, so indicating traffic from affiliate marketing efforts. Then other would be traffic from online advertising outside of search and display. It could be cost per view video advertising, any of the other advertising networks as well that the system can't necessarily place in the existing buckets. And then the last one is display. So traffic from display advertising, such as Google Ads, remarketing campaigns. So continuing on. We talked about source medium, right? So here, for example, we have channels, and then you can essentially drill down. Specifically here, we're looking at organic search, right? But there's many different search providers. So what we want to then do is we want to break it down by source medium. Here, we have a secondary dimension as we already looked at before. You can add secondary dimension, source medium. You can always, of course, access source medium directly, but then you have just this primary report. But we want to find out organic search and break it down by source medium. So here we see Google organic, or Baidu organic, or Bing organic, etc. So this then also helps, for example, in your SEO efforts, or just seeing which search engines are driving traffic to your website. And we touched upon the table filter. So what we have here is an example here where we want a source medium containing organic, right? So it removes the whole rows that don't meet a single criteria, right? And then we can do more advanced filtering, as mentioned before, that allows you more nuanced rules for filtering itself. Essentially, it's not overcrowding the data. And then if you're running any Google Ads campaigns, you can then have a specific report that just looks at Google Ads campaigns themselves. But to do this, you need to link Google Ads and Google Analytics accounts. So you can do this by going to the Settings tab, which is this gear icon here. And then you'll have this option, Google Ads linking. So the easy way of doing this is just ensure you have admin access to both Google Ads and Analytics with the same email address. Then this linking process is extremely easy. And then you have to basically look out for 2 green checks. So select linked Google Ads account. So you'll choose the ads account that the system sees that you have access to. And then you can then check if the link is configured correctly, if the correct view is being passed to the ads account itself. So if you're running any ads campaigns, I'd say this is definitely something that that you should have in place just to measure the what happens beyond just the pure acquisition itself. And also don't forget to check data sharing settings. So this will be in your account settings. And then here you'll have a checkbox saying Google products and services, because Analytics specifically needs this this checkbox for it to even be able to share data with your own Google Ads account. So pausing for questions. I see there's a question here. Can we get analytics reports on how many people use Google as the browser today? So this, if you mean specifically for your website, I'd say you can do either a real-time report that I touched upon earlier, or you go to the reports, and instead of selecting dates, like we selected, for example, last 30 days, you can select today, and you can then look at it in more granularity by selecting hours. But then it depends. If we deal with today, we face a few things like slight data delay in the general reports themselves, and also the time of the day that you're running this report. Essentially, if you want to be as accurate as possible to see this information of browser visitors for today, you'd ideally want to try to do that at 1 minute to midnight, because you have all the information of the day itself. Generally, when we analyze any of this kind of data, we usually look at the day before, and also before that. So if you're running Google Ads, for example, the default report will not include the day itself. Because, for example, if you're running a daily report and your kind of like your work time might be 4 p.m., you only get information up till 4 p.m. But if it turns out majority of your users do their browsing and, for example, shopping at 10 p.m. later that evening, this is where we can see inaccuracies in the data. So generally, if you run a report, run it the next morning for the previous day. And the next one is let me just quickly check. So if you can suggest any questions I need to ask to make sure their advertising plan is good, I'd welcome your input. Michael is just adding those in. Okay, at 1 p.m. today, I'll be well prepared. If you can suggest any questions I need to ask to make sure their advertising plan is good, I'd welcome your input. It's a broad question. It's a very broad question. I'd say, yeah, this goes into the side of the Google Ads. There's a big difference between analytics and how you analyze data and Google Ads itself. Always, I say any kind of marketing plans you do, think about the KPIs. Think about what you want the campaign to do. And what are kind of the main things you want to try to hit? Because marketing campaigns also are very different, right? There's more upper funnel, more mid funnel, more lower funnel, right? And each one of those have totally different things to think about. So fortunately, there isn't one size fits all kind of approach there, because there's different schools of thought in how to run optimizations, how to run correct media mixes. Yeah. And then a question from Dave. How long has Google Analytics been capable of real-time reporting? Is that a relatively new progression? So real-time reporting has been around for quite a while. I started looking into it, I'd say definitely 2+ years, or maybe even 3, or probably maybe even more. So it's always, it seems to be always one of the reports that's been around for quite a while. Perfect. I think that's it from the questions. We'll have a second question pause as well. So don't worry if we missed anything at the moment. There's going to be time as well, and at the end as well if we have enough time. Super. So let's move on to behavior reporting. So a lot of times, again, as with all the reports I mentioned before, this one's also super important. So as important, we need to know who the audiences are, how they get to the website. We also need to understand what they're how they're behaving with and interacting with your website. Very often, marketers just focus on that acquisition part. They drive the traffic to the site. They don't spend time understanding what they are doing on the site. Right? Is the landing page you're directing users efficient? What is the experience when they land on the landing page? Because the if for example, if you try other different landing page, will they browse the website in a different way? Because if you think about a time spent, generally, if a user goes on Google search, they might have the necessary information fairly quick. They will click on your ad, and that might only take 5 seconds. But then they'll spend about 3-4 minutes on your website. So it's very important not to miss that step in analyzing how you're interacting with your customers. Super. So behavior reporting. So as we saw, we have behavior here, and then this is the breakdown. We see here what else we can do. So we have our overview. We have a behavior flow. So we see how they flow through the website from the landing page. We can then have a look at site content. So what pages we see on the site. Site speed, which is quite important as well. So we see the browsing differences between the site speed and which pages are working better than others. Also, site search. So if your site has search functionality, and if it's set up in a way that Google Analytics can read it from the URL, you can also get insights on site search. So if it is a site that there's a lot of searching going on, you can identify what your users are looking for and their search behaviors themselves. Any kind of events, any publisher info, or any experiments that you might be running. So behavior, which pages do they visit? So here you can find this information under behavior and then site content and all pages. So this will then tell you all the basic info. So here in this example, home, so this is our home page, is the most visited page itself. No surprises there, I'd say. But then once we start looking a little bit more in detail, let's say our, for example, here, store. So store-specific page here, we see page views, unique page views, average time on site, and entrances and bounce rates, and also a page value. So for example, if users that are visiting or landing on specific key pages, are they more valuable? Are they converting more? Is the information that they receive more relevant to their interests, for example? So this is a great way of just checking where users spend time on your site and how they're interacting with the rest of the site as well, and how that reflects on the key metrics for that specific page. So data visualizations, segmentation. So segmentation is, again, a lot of these things that I'm saying are very important, but I'd say data segmentation is as well one of the key features in Google Analytics. Generally, it's something that users don't know initially how to do, or they just don't understand what to do with segmentation. So generally, when we look at a report, we look at all users. So, for example, it doesn't particularly matter if you look at a source medium acquisition report, it will look at all users only. If we look at a behavior report, it will also look at all users. But what if we then see any interesting patterns in general reports, like, for example, age buckets here, or any languages, or in market segments, or technology, for example, mobile? You can create this sub-segment. Here, for example, we have loyal visitors, right? By definition, could be sessions in the last 7 days or anything like that. And once you run a segmentation report, you will then compare, for example, all users versus loyal visitors. And it'll allow you to then see the differences between sessions, time on page, conversions, average revenue, bounce rates, things like that. So it gives you a really, really useful way of actually comparing different subset of users. So the most common one that we do with a lot of brands is a device report. So we want to see what's the difference between mobile users versus all users baseline. And then we can try to understand where we can improve, or if we need to improve anything in the website, or we need to rethink how we measure those specific that specific user journey. Because, for example, it could be that mobile user bounce rate is, let's say, 3 times higher, and they spend way less time on the website, because generally we're looking at a totally different interaction medium with your website itself. And then that can lead to more detailed things like UX analysis using Google Analytics. But sometimes you might even just need to know the difference. For example, if a user comes from one city, right, are they showing better engagement or interaction or conversion signals than your average users on the website itself? If you're running, also an interesting point, if you're running Google Ads, with most of these segments, you can also create a remarketing audience and then import those into Google Ads. So why would we use segments generally, as mentioned? So identifying trends, right? Comparing cohorts, low performing audiences or high performing audiences, marketing channels, elements of your site. So for example, marketing channels, you can do a quick comparison, the difference between users that come from organic search and paid search. Or social versus email. So it gives you a really interesting breakdown of the difference of these users. And just to reiterate, not all users are the same. Not all acquisition channels are the same as well. Each one of them might do a slightly different thing. One might be more upper funnel, one might be more lower funnel. And then kind of taking action from this is tailoring your marketing, site content, site structure, product, services based on behavioral data from your site visitors. So this is where we really kind of embrace data thinking or data first thinking. Of course, what we assume here, and especially when we're looking at analytics, is we're looking at a large subset of data, right? If you only have 10 visitors in the last 30 days, it's going to be a little bit difficult to extract meaningful trends from that information. But I know generally there isn't a set rule how much you need. Different websites will have different requirements. But essentially what you're then trying to understand is what you need to change based on data very often, a lot of brands, a lot of businesses, especially the starting stages, go a lot with their kind of assumptions, what they think is happening. And those are great as well, but you have data then to compare. A lot of insights happen in comparison with what you assume the users are doing on a website and what you can measure that the users are doing on a website. If they match, perfect. If they don't, then you try to identify what's causing this difference, and do you need to change anything, or do you need to adapt to it? And then, yeah, this is an example how we visualize, for example, paid traffic versus all users here. So here, for example, here we see all users and then just paid traffic users. You can change the metric to session duration, bounce rates, anything else you want to compare. So the last bit is conversion reporting. So essentially the KPIs, the business KPIs you're trying to hit. What are you trying to get your users to do on the website itself? So conversion reporting is in the conversions tab here, and there's 4 main kind of breakdowns here. So goals, e-commerce, if you're using e-commerce. If you're not using any e-commerce or selling products, goals will be your main, the main tab you'd be looking for information. Multi-channel funnels, we'll go into that in a second, and then attribution as well. So conversions. This is our overview. So we have it under conversions, goals in this specific case, and then overview. So a goal can be anything you set. So in the last week, you went through some of the examples. So this could be a newsletter sign up. This could be a subscription. This could be a purchase. A goal can sometimes be. I've worked with some publishers, and their goal might sometimes be 5 pages visited in a session, right? Anything along those lines. But the main metrics then we would see is, again, we have a date range selected. So in this case, 30 days. We have goal completions. So how many goals we've seen being completed in that time range. Here we have goal value of 0. So in this case, it's not an e-commerce goal, where goal hasn't had a monetary value assigned. And then we also see a goal conversion rate, so about 22%. Here we have also, we have purchases here, but this is just saying how many purchases, engaged users, because sometimes you also want to measure that engagement. And if you look at a conversion essentially hierarchy, ideally, let's say if you're selling something, you want a user to purchase something, and that's exactly why you're there, or the website is there. But there's also steps before that. So it could be things like adding to cart, browsing specific products from a category. So those are also important. If you're setting up goals, just think about what you're trying to measure. Don't overload yourself with amount of goals as well, but just focus on the key ones, and then run testing if you need to add more of those in. So keeping track of behavior, right? Customer journey to conversion, right? So this one's an interesting one as well. So we know who our audiences are. We know how they get to the website. We know roughly what they're doing on the website as well. So what we then want to find out is, to what extent do customers go through different phases? How long does the customer journey take to conversion as well? And then which channels are most often used? So these 3 key questions very often are at the center of kind of a Google Analytics analysis. Doesn't matter if it is for paid, if it is for organic, or anything else that you might be doing. So let's find out how we can find answers to these questions. So understanding the top conversion paths. So as we saw before, multi-channel funnel report here. And in the subsection here, we have something called top conversion paths. And this is really, really important to understand. So generally, assumption that we've seen with a lot of advertisers, and this was a few years ago, and hopefully it hasn't it's changed, and it has changed with a lot of clients, is that we moved from thinking that there's an action, so one interaction and an action taken, to understanding that digital is a little bit more complex. And then this kind of thinking of understanding how users are getting to your site and what they're doing in the site as well. So here we have an example that 152 conversions have happened from users that have interacted directly with a website twice. We also see here organic search to direct. We also see things like organic search direct twice, organic search to other advertising, or things even like direct 4 times. So this slightly kind of complicates the way we think about digital interaction, but it's a clearer reflection on user behaviors and how they get to the site itself. So what are the ways to assign value to different channels? And then how do we see which channel plays which role? And then how do we determine the correct attribution model? So attribution is generally something that everyone's been trying to figure out actively since marketing has been active, I'd say. So here's a fun little example. So we have a user that searches and clicks on search ad team building in Dublin. They click on your website from a review website. They see a remarketing ad. They search for City Hunt Dublin and clicks on an organic search result. And then they convert on your website. So to which interactions is the conversion assigned to? So this is the golden question that determines a lot of marketing strategy. So here, we might look just at importance of the last touch point. Quite a lot of businesses do that. So in this case, if we just look at that user then searches organically and then clicks on a result, and then they request a quote, and that's a kind of the last touch point. One thing to mention, Google Analytics works with a last non-direct click as an attribution model for the standard reports. So the last touch point is already considered decisive unless the last touch point enters via channel direct none. So in this case, the previous touch point is taken as decisive. So in this case, the system will then look at this is the last channel, which was from organic, and it wasn't a organic direct. So essentially, if we then assume that we're looking at the last touch point only, then that means there is no point to all of this. But we see that users have interacted with the website. They have searched, and they've been to the site itself. So I think it's important not to ignore those touch points and those steps. So question is, also the importance of the first touch point, how important that is. And what about interactions in the middle as well? So we see this is where things are getting a little bit more complex, but there's ways to solve for this complexity. So attribution models. So the question as well, who's already using attribution models, or are you using any different attribution models, or are attribution models something that you've been looking at or have come up in a conversation? So let us know in the chat as well. So an attribution model is the rule or set of rules that determines how the value of sales and conversions are attributed to certain touch points in a customer journey. So that's kind of our textbook definition itself. There's a few models. So basically all value to one interaction models. So last interaction, and then, for example, first interaction. Last interaction is the one you'd see most often a few years ago. Then we have things like time decay as well. So we assign higher value to the last touch point than the first touch point. And then we also have a linear model that assigns the equal value throughout the journey. And then we also have position-based model that assigns higher value to first touch point and the last touch point. So which model to choose? Again, it's a fairly complex decision. Generally, when you're working with Google Analytics, I leave the attribution model to the default model itself, but then I run comparisons. So I'll show you the reports that you can compare these models to see the differences. In some cases, there isn't a huge difference because it's fairly, it might be fairly well worked a well worked out conversion journey. But when we're looking at very complex clients, we see differences there. So for example, if where would you consider a position-based attribution model? So, for example, if so, we've used this with some of the brands that are entering new markets. So they're interested in growing the new users and just basically getting more users into the funnel, and they also want to care. They care about what is the last kind of the closing channel itself. So with something like this, it allows for easily to identify what channels are bringing in the overall users, and then what channel is actually then converting as a last click. But generally, I'd say the value of attribution model is in the comparison between the both, or all of them. So example value distribution. So this is how you can see this. So when you go to that to report and attribution models, you'll see your multi-channel funnel channel grouping. So for example, here, paid search, direct, organic search, email. You can specify which conversions you want to also just analyze. So this could be goals, e-commerce, whatever it is. You can set a look back window. And then here we have last interaction. And you can then compare that to a model of your choice. So you want to see, for example, how big the difference is between a last interaction and first interaction, right? And then the differences that you'll see will then inform you a little bit which channels are driving in the upper funnel traffic and which channels are kind of the channels that are last touch point. And then just understanding then what of each of these channels do. You can't expect a channel that's more awareness channel to close, to sell, to convert exactly the same way as a channel that's, for example, a more intent-based channel. So, for example, search, where a user expresses intent to find a solution, versus something that's that's more awareness. So, understand what each channel is doing and what's it there for, and then essentially look at the stats from that point of view. So last one, I'd say one of the last points is dashboards. So what's a dashboard? So it's a tool that allows immediate representation of data in an intelligible visual manner, which makes data easily accessible and comprehensible, and which makes it easy to highlight certain focal points. So instead of clicking through all these reports and creating segments every time you're running an analysis, so this could be daily, weekly, monthly, you can create a dashboard that gives you a quick snapshot of what's going on. So, for example, here some of the examples are device dashboard, SEO performance dashboard, audience snapshot, things like that. Generally, what you want to do is, when you think about dashboards and data visualization, make it quick, easy, and accessible. There's no point of replicating an analytics report exactly the same way, because you can just access it with one click. Just think about where you can add value when you're creating these dashboards. And if you tuned into Luis's webinar last week or watched it before this one, you'll remember the worksheet and the measurement plan itself. So now that we covered kind of how to retrieve insights, they might make more sense now. So if we then think about, if we break this down, so C, awareness, right? So a KPI then also changes. So number of visitors on my website, right? So where it's measured data. So in this case, Google Analytics will be across the board. The target changes as well a little bit. For example, 1,000 visitors a month, for example, here. And then a metric might be users or new users as well. When we go into the consideration phase, we might see things like number of sessions on a product detail page, or sessions a month. And then we have things like unique page views, detail pages, etc. Then also that we look at purchases, conversions, so the do phase, leads from my website through contact form as an example KPI, and then your target would be certain number of contact form submissions per month, per week, whatever you decided to be that makes sense. And then the metrics you'd be looking at would be something like goal completions, forms submitted, anything along those lines. So the actual interaction with a website and users doing what you've kind of set out for them to do. And then care loyalty here, we would have returning visitors on the website. Again, things like goal completions, goal metrics, so goal completions of the goal form submitted, similar kind of target itself, metric users from user type, returning. So that's also quite an important bit. So returning users, generally when we look at paid marketing or anything like that, returning users, they're already familiar with your brand. So you might, for example, have a look how users that have signed up or purchased something from you before, how they are behaving with your website. Perfect. So a measurement plan ensures that you speak the same language, right? So how you set up the analytics and what you're asking of these analytics will then help you actually read it properly. And if you need any other kind of visualization or working with larger data sets, I'd say try Google Data Studio. I haven't already. It's something that I do train quite a lot of Googlers and clients to use as well. Super nice little tool, and sometimes just use it to analyze large data sets as well. So summary. So make sure that you gain insight into how your visitors proceed through your website, right? So understanding who they are, how do they end up on your website, and what pages do they visit. Do not analyze whole chunks of data, but use segments. Yeah, so don't be overloaded. When you have to look through 1,000 points of data, it becomes a little bit overwhelming. Think about what you want to find out from the system. And then to properly assess and analyze each group of visitors. And then third, think of building out dashboards where you can find all the necessary information at a glance. So try out Data Studio or just even dashboards directly from Google Analytics. So newly acquired data only matters if this data results in specific actions. Yes, measurement is cool, but what are you going to do with that data? Nice. And we have pausing for questions. Super. Let me then have a look. So is there behavioral segmentation? So behavioral, yes, you can set it up into segments, user interaction with the website itself. And then it might be sessions in the last week, or if they visited specific pages, or they've arrived from specific source. What could be the reason for not having any data and site speed? I have a feeling that something might be up with the setup. That's something that I would try to troubleshoot, because generally you should have more information there. If you have an option, perhaps Michael can add in a Google Analytics Help Center site. There's quite a lot of information about site speed and how to troubleshoot and what steps you can take. And then we have another question. Is there a report that says which site a visitor came from to your site? I had that an old site, but can't find it recently. So usually, yes. So when you look at acquisition reports, you can then break it down into if you click on any of the reports, so this could be a referral or affiliate or display or anything like that. Once you click on that, it should then give you a breakdown of all the sites that the users might be coming from. Looking back at the audience, is it normal that the cross-device report doesn't show any data in the master view, but works well in the user ID view? In some cases, in some reports, you might only be able to access it from a certain sub report itself, because they might not necessarily fit in with the other bits of data. Generally, you can then double check again in the support center if the setup is correct. But if it's working in one part, I then focus on running a report on the segment or the report that it is working on. And yeah, any other questions? Perfect. So what are the next steps? Just running through this is continue your learning online. So booking a live webinar. And check out our online courses. And yeah, thank you very much for your time today. Thank you for the questions. And yeah, if you can go and visit the website as well, just to find out more information. And hopefully this session was useful. And yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, have a great rest of the day.